been provided to the Co-Star, the official newspaper of the Borough of Belmar, and the Asbury Park Press on December 7, 2017. A notice of this meeting was posted on the bulletin board of the municipal building.
Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
just remain standing for a moment of silence for our troops and their families. Okay, thank you. Okay, first up on the workshop discussion, we'll talk about the CDL loan, which is great, terrific, super news. A loan that we took after the storm of over $4 million. We just found out about this past year because the loan was coming due, and we found out that it's been forgiven. So it's complicated. So what we figured we'd do is call up our CFO, Robin Kirk, and our auditor, Chuck Fallon, to come up and explain to us why Washington, D.C. was so generous to the borough of Belmar.
I think Colleen has a little bit to go over
Oh,
also.
Sure, come on
I'm sorry,
up.
Colleen.
So as
It's okay.
it was kind of a joint effort of everybody.
Yes.
So part of this has to do with administration also and how we operated the borough during those few years. So I think she wants to go over a little bit first, and then I can go over the revenue side,
Right.
how this all worked out.
So as you're all aware, we were advised of an opportunity back in 2013 to take advantage of a community disaster loan program. The amount that we were eligible for was $4.4 million. We did take the maximum amount of that fund and took it in 1 year, in 2013. We spread it across our current fund, our beach utility, and our water sewer. What we've experienced in the years since then is, for me, I think, why the CDL loan was created in the beginning, which is when you're talking about creating a stable environment in which a community can recover. It's not just about the municipality's expenses, it's about the expenses of your citizens, and your beachgoers, and your water sewer payers. And so, in the years after a disaster, if the town has to, let's say, increase taxes, or increase water sewer rates drastically in order to keep your budgets whole, your residents will suffer because they themselves are also recovering from a disaster. And so the idea of a community disaster loan and how it's borne out here in Belmar has done that. It's created a stability that allowed both the government and our residents a period of recovery. Now, all that led to what was that ultimately very good news when an incredibly complicated federal formula that determines whether or not you're forgiven in whole or partially happens. But that's when I'm going to turn it over to Robin, who can explain why it mattered in terms of those 3 years.
I don't know if we can
Yeah.
kind of hand these out. We've actually been going not totally over this in the budget each year, but we do these slides every year.
Yeah.
That we kind of, I usually whoop through, and everybody goes, yay, afterwards. One of the things that really helped us when it came to this community disaster loan was keeping our revenues down. Again, not increasing rates, et cetera. At the same time, though, we were keeping our expenses down. We were holding people to the line, so much credit also to our department heads. So what that allowed us to do was actually, if you look at this sheet here, you will see in 13 where we dropped our revenue anticipation. Okay, our basic reoccurring revenues that we expect to get in every single year. What we offset that with, in order to keep our budget stable, was that CDL loan, to make our budget stay stable.
So you would take that magenta bar, and the CDL loan
Kind
would
of
be
tack
on
the
top.
CDL loan on top of it, to keep level with our expenses. This is just our revenues, okay? What we did over the next couple of years was that we started coming back up to our previous numbers, keeping everything stable. Did we keep revenues down? Yes, we did. We didn't raise taxes. We had a drop in our boat slip rentals. It was things like that, by us not increasing and basically using this CDL money to keep us stable. If you I know there's people that go out and look at our surplus. You will see where our surplus, we actually kept it stable, actually ticked up a little bit, second year, because we had this money. Used that money again in the third year. So it allowed us to bank some surplus, then use that surplus over the next couple of years and not increase fees, but able to keep our expenses stable. If we had a drastic increase in expenses, we would have had to raise revenues, we'd be paying this back. So it was on both sides of it, once I really understood this formula, because let me tell you what, it has been a year of trying to understand these spreadsheets from the federal government. I had Chuck here to help me. We've been reviewing, we had to go back to 2012, 3 months ago, and actually go back and look at that, pre-storm numbers.
Right.
They wanted to re-review those, which then actually helped a lot of these calculations also. So that's basically the way a CDL loan works. Keep everything stable, keep everything flat, don't over-anticipate anything, because you're basically using the Fed money to keep yourself stable. And that's what helped us during this.
And then when you do that, they say, okay, you're good.
You're good. So then, and honestly, what we did, the entire borough again, took advantage of during this time period was what other revenues can we come up with now going forward? So over the past couple of years, I know I've given the budget presentations, well, how are you still not raising taxes? It's those other non-reoccurring revenues that we've now gotten into place.
And so that's why we wanted to provide you with this slide from the budget, which shows after 2013, that kind of constant ramping up of other recurring revenues, which was, again, the CDL loan provided us a Band-Aid for a couple of years as we were recovering while we started bolstering our interlocal agreements, we started bolstering pilot payments, concession rents, things that would allow us to distribute the burden and not just on the taxpayer.
Okay?
If we had not taken the CDL loan, what do you think would have been like since the storm?
Do I think, well, again, not besides the taxes, okay, which again, I know we all didn't raise taxes. There were other revenues we were trying to deal with, and the main one that always sticks out in my head is, let's say, for instance, the marina rents, which I know they have come back, finally. I think this is the first year we're back over the number. It's those types of revenues. Building permits, for the first couple of years, we were waiting to building permit fees. That's a revenue in your budget that, although they were still good, don't get me wrong, they were down. So it was those kinds of items that we would have had to make up for someplace. Or look for other ways, or honestly, it would have been other cuts on the departments on the expense side.
And that's the way I think of it. If we had not taken advantage of this loan, I think in those years after the storm, council would have been faced with decisions of either raising taxes or cutting services. And because we had that loan, we had that little bridge, we were able to get through those problematic 3 years without doing either.
Okay. Chuck, do you want to add anything?
Well, that's very complicated, but in a nutshell, this formula that the federal government has to determine whether you have to pay it back or not worked out in your favor, and they're satisfied that you use the money for the right purpose.
Okay, and this is final. They can't, let's say, a year from now, come back and say, well, we've looked it back over. So this is.
And honestly, this has been going on for almost 4 months, at least 4 months since the last time we've had emails with them. And I know everybody's been like, what's going on, what's going on, what's going on? This went up to them, I signed off on it back in July. And it was like, all right, when is this real final determination coming out? We just got it a week ago. The final letter, that it's done, it's over with.
No more letters.
No.
I'm not
Okay.
expecting any
And
more.
you can sleep at night now?
I've never not lost sleep, but yeah. So,
Breathing a little easier.
okay,
I just want to add,
yes,
great job to all three to get this thing done, because I know that was been hanging over our head for a couple
Right.
of years. Now, I know there was 3 different areas of this. There was like $2 million for the beach utility, so much for the town, and so much
Yes.
for the water utility. Now, all 3 of them, yeah, you
All
had
three.
a,
All 3 are gone. We did about 1.5 million in the current fund, about 2.2 million in the beach utility, and about $750,000 in the water sewer. They're all gone.
so.
It's all forgiven.
One thing I will give the next person that wants to ever deal with one of these, hope we never have another hurricane. One thing we did learn through this entire process, and not just here, I've learned it other places that I have to deal with these things. they look at the town as a total.
Yeah.
They consider your utilities enterprise funds, and they consider your current fund. If anybody was to ever suggest taking one of these again, take a separate loan on each one of your budgets. Because let's say, for instance, our beach utility, honestly, we know did good that year after the storm. The current fund in the water and sewer, not so good, but it was looking at the town as a whole. So once we really got started getting into this about 2.5 years ago, when I started getting the, wait a minute, my current fund or my water was really the one I was mainly concerned about. You could not do each one separately. Even though you applied that money separately, you would have had to take 3 separate loans. So just
And
going
tell
forward.
them that each one is for this and this one's for that.
And this one's for that, rather
They'll
than
let
the
you do
town as a whole and then
Oh,
splitting it up, but just a suggestion going forward. If it ever was to happen again, you should
Like it
go
does.
3 separate, one loan, a separate loan for each. And again, it didn't kind of dawn on anybody, I don't think, in
Who
any
would
town,
know? Who would know?
until we started going through all this.
We never put that wasn't part of like our debt service or anything like that. That was always completely separate.
Completely separate,
Separate.
completely separate.
No, good job.
Separate.
Good job.
And like I said, I don't, this was all across the board on us all harping on everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry you're getting nothing, because we gotta keep those revenues down. Not just
Getting nothing.
but for everybody.
Okay.
Okay, so those expenses also had to stay down.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next on the workshop discussion, Mark Levis, I'll let you take the lead. It's Parks Commission that you're looking at.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I just want to discuss the possibility of drafting an ordinance to form a Parks Commission for the Borough of Belmar. I've brought this up a couple times in my reports, and I think we had a brief workshop on it. I really think it would benefit us to have a similar commission to our Harbor Commission and our Environmental Commission that's sole focus is to look at the parks. So I took an example from an existing ordinance written by the Township of Cranberry. And I just wanted to read quickly what their duties were, just so you get an idea of what this type of commission would do and how it would benefit our town. So powers and duties. The commission's purpose shall be to assist the township in designing, developing, planning, management, and maintenance of the township's parks and creation of maintenance of a balanced park system. To achieve this purpose, the commission shall have the following duties and responsibilities: review, offer, comment, and make recommendations on all development of township parks, including but not limited to the design and location and placement of temporary and permanent structures, equipment, facilities, seating, playing fields, trees, other vegetation, pathways, and roadways. Review all park-related initiatives related to and offer comment on the balance between age and interest groups, activities and passive park activities, design and other park-related issues. Review and as necessary make recommendations for the changes to the rules, regulations, and ordinances concerning the township parks. Review, offer comment, and make recommendations on the portion of the Public Works annual proposed budget that is designated for developing the township's parks and funding and new replacement park equipment and facilities. Next, I come to the authority, because we want to make sure we're still containing the authority within the council. Again, I only want this to be an advisory commission at this point. So from an authority standpoint, they list the commission shall be an advisory commission only. The township committee shall receive and consider the recommendations of the Parks Commission, but shall not be bound by any comments or recommendations. So the ordinance I read is a little bit, you can take it or leave it. It's a little bit comprehensive. I think it covers what we want to cover. There may be some things we want to pull in or pull out, but I really think with this as a foundation and a base, and we know they're doing it in other places. I think this type of commission can really benefit our parks as a whole.
Okay. Do you consider the beachfront a park?
I wouldn't in terms of this particular ordinance.
Okay. What about the marina?
The marina itself, I wouldn't, but I think we have to look at, I think we'd have to look at the areas that are designated by Green Acres as parkland within our municipality.
So I was just gonna offer, we do maintain a ROSI, which is the Recreation Open Space Inventory, which is DEP's official classification of our greenland and parkland. It does include the beach and the marina,
Okay.
but there's nothing saying that you can't specify within the ordinance itself what parks you need.
Yeah, we already have departments to cover the beachfront and marina. And I think it would be good, actually, within the ordinance to list the particular parks we have in question, just so that there's no gray area.
How many people are you thinking for the commission? What's a good number?
This one consisted of 7. That's similar to our harbor commission. We have 7 members, 2 of which are council members.
The environmental commission too.
Mhm.
I don't see anything that jumps out as a problem as long as it's an advisory, because we don't want to go around telling the DPW what they have to do, and, you know, I don't want it to try and take authority away from the mayor and council.
No, and again, this would only be advisory. I mean, the ultimately authority lies with us to spend the money related to this upkeep.
Right.
But I think it's very good to have the citizens of our town who take an interest in these parks have a mechanism in place to make recommendations, make improvements, so that it's not just a person coming up and talking to you and saying, I want to see this. It's a great way for us to coalesce some great ideas around our parks and see some substantial and meaningful improvements to them.
Okay, then the next question would probably be, how do we move forward?
Go to the attorney.
Brad, we'll go to the attorney and say, how do you form a new Parks Commission?
Well, it starts with the passage of an ordinance, as the council referenced to. It's typically my job to take the ideas that you have. And for example, Councilman Brennan provided me with numerous of the balloon release ordinances. We had the artificial turf discussion for several months, where I reviewed every ordinance across the country, more or less. I typically craft that into what your borough code has. So for example, one of the changes I'd like to make is it says almost all the volunteer positions in your town are mayor with advising consent of council. I note that the Cranberry one just says mayor shall appoint vacancies.
Sure.
I'd assume that you guys would want those kind of changes. And I usually move them to comport with what's in line with your other similar departments. So I probably model it largely after the Harbor Commission, meld it with the Cranberry. I like the powers and duties and the authorities in there. I think that and the authority is very clear. So I'd probably meld that together to kind of mimic the Harbor Commission. It's typically what I do. And then I give it to you guys, and if you guys have any suggestions, I usually change them. Colleen's always very helpful because she knows how everything works here. I go from there.
Colleen, do you see anything that,
No, I think it's a pretty straightforward concept, and we're not too ashamed to steal something that's working for another town and just modify it to work well for us. So I think between Greg, April, and myself, we can get something together for introduction at your next meeting, if you think that's appropriate. Okay.
sure. Mark, how do you feel?
I'm not sure yet. I just, I just don't want to have this commission dictating to the DPW. They do such a great job now. I mean, if they're going to advise on shrubs and when things need to be done, but I mean, Mike and his crew, we got so many new parks. I'm just saying that it's another layer to, so I'm not sure how I feel. I mean, yeah, it's good to have it in place, but you don't want to have the frustrations of them trying to do something and the DPW's already doing it. So I'm up in the air on it.
As long as it would still be just advisory, they could recommend, I guess, to the council, and then if something the council wants, then we can follow the chain of command and recommend, and then the DPW would come back and say, all right, this is not a good time because we're swamped with this other work that we have to get done. So, we might be able to work it together with communication.
Can I make a suggestion to you guys? If you're concerned about that sort of overlap and kind of interfering with people that work here, their daily duties, so to speak. Typically what I've seen in other towns when they've had this kind of commission is that largely the requests from the commission come during budget time, during the capital budget, rather than really like on a daily basis, like, hey, Mike, you need to fix that bench. So if you changed G as part of the ordinance that you were just reading, instead of reviewing and commenting on the public department, DPW's budget and kind of inserting an advisory board into the budget process, perhaps they could have a date by which to provide you with recommendations for the following year's park improvements or things like that. And then that puts the power in your hands to say, well, we have the money for that, we don't have the money for that. And then typically what I've seen is once the ones that are funded, then they bring the Parks Commission back in to say, I like red benches versus blue benches versus this works well, I walk my dog here, and the pathways and stuff like that. So I think that part of your guys' concern, I can see you guys worried about Park Commission people bothering everyday employees. Perhaps they could submit annual recommendations on improvements to the parks for the following year, which is effectively the same thing as offering comment recommendations on the budget for the parks. But they provide that to directly to the council, and then we preserve the chain of command kind of down the way, and there's not any confusion in that regard. If you guys,
Yeah,
that's your
something like
pleasure.
that would be a lot better. I just don't want them having a meeting and then calling DPW and saying, you know, we want this done.
I just think the purpose
We
of
want
G
the
is
grass
that they
done,
get,
or,
you know, some sort of say in what happens in the parks or plantings or equipment, things like that, but largely that's ultimately determined by the budget. So I think if you change G to that, they provide annual recommendations, or they have an end of the year meeting or end of the season meeting or something like that, whatever fits with the budget timeline, versus having direct input into DPW decisions. I think that would be a good change that would.
And to color your fears a little bit, Mark, I mean, the way we operate the Harbor Commission is almost exactly the same, right? I mean, the Harbor Commission is advisory only.
Yeah.
You know, DPW still maintains the marina.
Mhm.
So the Harbor Commission doesn't have
No,
to
I
set
get
the
it.
DPW's budget for the marina or the
Yeah.
repairs that go on there. That's still strictly in DPW's hands.
I'm just thinking of all our parks are, I mean, every one of them are brand new, I think, now.
Pretty much,
Yeah, so.
Well, our playgrounds are, but we can't say our parks are all brand new. They've been there for a while, and they're certainly,
They may not be
Certainly
new,
some
but
things that
they're
we can
really
do
well
as well.
maintained.
Yeah, so, I mean, I'm up in the air. It's not that I have a fear of it, you know, I just want to make sure that the advisory committee that's put together for this, you know, like Greg had said, they answered once a year that they request something and we can see if we can afford it or not. You know, that would be something that, a good direction for them. You know, I just don't want them to have a meeting and call Mike Campbell the next day and say, we want new sod in this place.
no, and I don't think that's, again, that doesn't happen with the Harbor Commission. I don't foresee it happening with this type of commission.
Tom?
So, with those changes, I'm fine with it.
Tom?
I think it's a good idea. I think, I agree with Councilman Walsberg on his concerns about overlapping authority, and I think what the attorney is saying is that's the way to do it. I mean, make sure it's really clear, and definitely, when you say modeling on the Harbor Commission, that's exactly what comes to mind. I mean, the Harbor Commission makes the recommendations, and then council acts on it, or not, whatever seems to be the right thing to do.
Very good.
Okay, we have a direction. Thank you.
We have a direction. Anything else on workshop discussion?
Yes, I got one more thing. It was brought to my attention about the gazebo at Silver Lake. It seems like we're having a lot of weddings and a lot of engagements down there, and now we have people nailing things into the wood and putting up all kind of signs and leaving the place a mess. So I think that we're gonna have to either take a look at it, either they gotta put a deposit up or something like that. Mike Campbell and his crew have been down there all the time, taking the nails out of the place where they nail things up, staples, and leaving the balloons. And then, I think it was 2 weeks ago, people had all kind of tables out there with food and everything else. So, I think we're gonna have to take a look at, maybe looking at that ordinance, either to charge them and get a deposit, or if we don't wanna charge them, at least get a deposit, because it's, from what I hear, it's been a little bit out of control this summer. So I don't know how everybody feels about that, but,
We get a deposit for Chiller Pavilion, correct?
yeah, we get a deposit for Taylor Pavilion, it's gonna be,
Yeah.
we should do the exact same thing down there.
Nobody needs a permit to do anything like that, to take pictures, or do they need a permit to use it?
So right now, the way the gazebo works is it's a free permit. So you have to.
But you do have to get a
You
permit.
have to get a permit, there's no charge for it, and there's no security deposit on it, and this is something that we've talked about for years. And certainly, you know, and recently, some of our troubles at the gazebo had nothing to do with a wedding or a bride, but vandalism, which was a massive amount of work that DPW has been doing over the last week to 10 days. I think that it certainly is reasonable and appropriate to think about charging either an application fee, so at least let's say it's $50, right? That $50 goes into a fund that then is available to help when we need to sand it down and repaint it. So I would encourage you guys to think about something like that. Certainly when we go about setting the fees and schedules for the new year, that's something that you can consider at that time. The security deposits, it's working very well with Taylor Pavilion. We have a punch list, we inspect the facility after it's over, and hopefully we can return all of that security deposit to the renter. We could take the same approach, although my recommendation would be an application fee, so that we are getting a consistent amount of money that can accumulate to help offset expenses.
When did that change? Because I know when that Heisman gazebo was first built, because I was recreation director, we always charged.
It's been free since I've been here. I don't know if, Mike, you know anecdotally when that might have changed?
I don't know what year it changed.
Yeah, we always charged a fee, and as Mark said, they were always told no tax staples or nails. It just flows out my mouth.
They're always told that.
And
yes.
they always put in tax staples and nails. So there should be an application fee, and there should be a security deposit. And what happens is the bride and groom, they aren't the ones that decorate. It's some other, the florist, they come in and they just automatically take that staple gun and bang, 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 put in the tool all around to make that, and with staples, we should surely make that go back to what it originally was when we first started renting that out. We rented out the gazebo before Taylor Pavilion was ever used for a wedding site.
What we can do is get a recommendation together for your consideration, and when we advance the resolution setting fees for 2019, we can include it in there.
Definitely.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, we don't, if there's a wedding there this weekend, we don't want to suddenly turn around and say,
That would be plus.
you owe money. Okay, anything else?
Just how are we making out with the stormwater runoff for the, are we doing anything with that ordinance to look at some of the ordinances in different towns?
We've workshopped it a bit this last week. I hope to have something to introduce to you at your next meeting, because we've been, I'm sorry, I want to say we've been putting out fires, but it's really putting out sump pumps all over town as we're addressing these problem areas. And so it's been rather taxing, most specifically to the residents who are living with the standing water near their properties. DPW has been phenomenal in addressing some of the really problematic ones, but we now have a few ordinances that we feel like we're ready to present for your consideration. So that at the very least, new construction moving forward would have to tie in and include language that says to all extents feasible, right, where existing sump pump maybe exists, if we can get them to drainage, that they would have to do it. So.
Okay.
One thing is that gentleman that came to us at the last meeting, that problem was resolved. The neighbor that was pumping water into the street, he did correct the problem. You're right, there's a lot more in town that are all over the place. I wonder if there's any way that we can get someone to walk the streets and go to find out where that water is coming from, because it's usually, you see it, a notch in the curb where it pumps out. We don't want to go there right after a storm, because that's, everyone's pumping water, but, someone that's still pumping like a week after it stopped raining, that's someone we should,
I'm sure Mike is a good idea.
I know it's a good one, and I'm gonna kick myself for saying it. However, if you guys wish to put it out there almost like you do with the potholes, if somebody if they have a problem that's ongoing with a water problem in front of their house or their neighbor's house, especially because of a sump pump, if they want to let us know about it, we can look at it, but I am also put together a street sweeping schedule with anybody that has chronic problems that we may not be able to address or the homeowner's not willing to address. I do send a street sweeper down there, especially when it's warm out or when it's icy or anything, to make sure there's no standing water, as we did all day today. The street sweeper was pretty much taken off his route today and put on standing water detail. So anybody that we knew had standing water issues or any standing water he saw, he tried to suck it up because it is a vac truck, and he tried to clean it and get any of the green or anything else out of there. Enforcement and ourselves to go out there and meet with the homeowners and try and address them as we can. You're not going to get them all, but again, if it does nothing else, it should alert the street sweeper to come over there and make sure there's no mold or green growth in their streets or anything like that. So we do our best with it, but I'm sure we don't get them all. I'm sure somebody out there is not happy with something.
Some of the streets are so level that the water doesn't flow to the corners. So I know we're going to have 12th Avenue repaved in a few weeks, correct? And I know C Street between B and D, I didn't have to tell you people that C is between B and D. It's very level, so if when they repave that, if they can just kind of pitch it so the water runs from C Street towards B and then on the other towards D Street, that might help. Or I guess, I know we had a problem with over on South Lake Drive, where the water was real flat, and they put in some type of macadam where the water sinks. That would help some of these areas that have standing water, if we can do that. I don't know.
Sure, and sorry, we hope to be out to bond and bid in a couple of weeks. The work's a little further out, but not too much.
For the paving.
For the paving, but certainly with all of these.
Oh, I told them it was gonna happen tomorrow.
Okay, cool. We'll get out there. We absolutely approach all these projects with either can we get drainage under the ground when we're opening that road to resurface, or is there a pitching solution that we can do? And obviously our preference is to get the drainage under the ground.
Yep.
Benefits everyone,
Absolutely.
so,
And they know what we're talking about when we ask them that. They don't just,
yes.
no, you can't do that, or yeah, and then ignore us. Okay, good. Right? Mark?
I have one more thing, Mayor. I know Robin left already, but I want to thank her on her impending retirement. And I think it's very important that we take a very careful look at who our new CFO is going to be. Now, back in June, we created these committees at the council. And one of them that was created was the Finance, Grants, Lease, and Personnel Committee. And I feel this is a good way to make sure we select the right candidate. I think we have an opportunity here to take a good hard look at what we need and use this council committee as a tool for selecting a candidate pool for the council and the mayor to pick for a CFO.
Well, that's already addressed in the ordinance. We have an ordinance that each council member can select three members to be interviewed. Council members can sit in on the interview.
Okay.
And then you can make a recommendation as who you would want to get the position. But the final decision is the mayor's. We have a strong mayor form of government.
Sure, absolutely.
Then when the mayor makes a recommendation, then it goes to the council for a vote. So really, the council won't be left out of it. You can sit on every interview that a person that applies. What I would like to do is hire a firm to look at everybody's resume and then recommend to us. I mean, I do not know what a good resume for a CFO looks like. They will. And they can recommend to us. Now, you're not a CFO, and Tom's not a CFO, Mark's not a CFO. So I think we really should defer to their expertise. But you can still recommend someone to be interviewed. And we'll interview them.
How are we deciding on which firm we would like to look at this? Robin's going to be out of here in December, and we don't have a whole lot of time, so I think it'd be very beneficial if we get on this rather quickly, so that we have a long time to look at the right pool of candidates.
Well, we can, I've already been contacted by 2 firms that would like to do this for us. And because of the professional service it doesn't have to go out to bid. We can put
No, that was my question. Good.
an RFP out and say, okay, we're gonna be doing this,
Okay.
but we wanna limit your work for us to $5,000. You know, and then what they'll do is they'll come in and, check out the interviews, and they'll probably recommend to us who the best candidates are. Maybe they'll even sit in at the interview, because they would probably know what questions to ask, better than I would know what to ask. And you could be there also, being on the personnel committee. So, you're more than involved, you're being on the personnel. But when it comes down to our ordinance, I make the decision of nominating someone, and then the borough and council votes on it. Greg, do I have that correct?
Let me just finish reading.
Okay.
Just to understand the process, is.
Yes, that's correct. It's ordinance 1115.
Ordinance 1115. And then what
Assume the mayor
about?
and council here fought at some point in time over this exact issue. Because it says, all positions within the borough of Belmar for any full-time position, essentially the entire council has to get all the resumes. And any two members, each member of the council can identify up to 3 applicants from those resumes who they believe should be interviewed. Each applicant who is designated for an interview by at least 2 members of the borough council shall be interviewed by the mayor or such department heads or other municipal personnel, which could presumably be a consultant, that the mayor shall designate to serve as the interviewing committee. And then, any member of council who shall desire to participate in all of the interviews for a position shall be entitled to do so. Those participating in the interview shall submit their individual or joint recommendations to the mayor in writing with copies to all members of the borough council. Notwithstanding, so with unanimous consent of the borough council, you could dispense with all those requirements. Where the position is to be filled by an existing full-time employee of the borough. And then the final E is the decision to hire an applicant shall be in accordance with applicable laws and ordinances. And for the position of CFO, that is with the mayor's nomination with advising consent of council. So you basically have the procedure already outlined in your ordinance, more or less.
So I understand.
I don't know how that came, I've never seen an ordinance like that, but I assume at some point people were arguing here, because I don't see why you'd spell it out like that otherwise. So that's the process in the ordinance. 1115 is the citation.
So the process would be, you advertise the position. you get
Which,
applications.
we've already done that, right?
So now you're gonna take in applications and we're gonna give them to the consulting firm.
Right, and they'll probably review them, and then they could recommend, we can say, you select 3, 5, 7, and then you can say, oh, I have this person, I want this person to be interviewed, and then we would sit down and interview.
So the resumes would come to the borough first. All right, that's all I was wondering.
Well, they have to come to everybody, it says here.
Oh, that's what
Yeah.
everybody.
Yes, everyone on the council. Mayor shall cause each member of the borough council to be provided with copies of the resumes or employment applications submitted by interested candidates for a posted full-time opening.
Yeah.
That means everyone gets every resume, then each of you can designate up to 3 applicants. And if 2 of you say so, then the mayor has to interview that person.
So if Tom says he wants somebody, but none of us,
Well, I should say, the mayor or the mayor's designee
Okay.
interviews them, so,
Right.
or municipal personnel or department head. So the mayor could say, I'm not interviewing for this company, this is every position in the town,
Yeah,
according to
right.
this. So that if the mayor doesn't want to hire, a full-time position that's, you could designate that to the department head or a consultant presumably, what it says here, or basically anybody.
Just to
Administrator.
interject, it's not, the way it says every full-time position in the borough, that's not governed by a collective bargaining agreement, I believe. So
Sure.
there's
Forgive
there's
me.
a reason why this doesn't happen all the time.
Unclassified position.
Unclassified
Forgive
positions,
me.
there's only a handful of them in the borough.
yeah,
That's what unclassified means. Oh, I get it.
yeah, we don't want to interview every gate attendant or
Right.
No.
laborer or.
Right.
Sure, but for a critical position like this, I think it's important that
Exactly,
we
exactly.
have this mechanism in place.
So obviously, whoever wrote that,
That's pretty much it right there.
thought of it, and he's got it covered, and we'll just follow their lead. Okay, anything else? Workshop?
I have one thing, but I think I'm gonna bring it up during my report.
Okay.
With that, we can move along.
Okay, seeing no more discussion for the workshop. Petitions, anybody out there in the audience that would like to come forward with a petition, please step up to the microphone. Seeing none, we will go to approval of minutes.
I make a motion to approve the minutes of the September 18, 2018 meeting and that they be posted on the borough's website.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Or abstain.
Okay,
Is that enough?
now moving on to reports of council. Councilman Levis?
The only report I have is that the Fall Festival will be this weekend in the plaza. Should be a good time. Finally have decent weather. It's not going to be pouring. And then the senior luncheon is going to be at DJ's next Wednesday, October 10th.
Okay.
That's all for me.
You seem hardly old enough for the senior lunch. Okay. Councilman Walsberg?
Thank you, Mayor. The only thing I have is progress. I don't have anything as well, this week.
Okay. Councilman Brennan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I attended my first Tourism Commission meeting this past Wednesday, and it was really quite eye-opening. And one of the things I asked about, because the Fall Festival this year is not going to be on Main Street, and it kind of breaks my heart, but I can see why we're trying something different. And I asked how the layout was going to be over in the parking lot by the plaza, and I actually think what was described to me is actually really not a bad setup. And it looks like, you got to see what happens. The first time you try something new, you never know. But it really looks like it's set up nicely. There'll be a beer garden, there'll be a stage. They're going to close off the 8th Avenue entrance to the parking lot. One of my concerns was, the food trucks that are usually in the street during the Fall Festival, I would assume they're going to be there, and I didn't want them blocking the restaurants that are over there, and they're not. They're going to be down at the other end of the parking lot, near where the children's area is. There's going to be a children's area, and there's going to be the puppy parade. Please don't tell my wife and daughter there's a puppy parade. Please don't. Anyway, it looks really good, and I'm not going to mention anything about the weather because it's a total jinx, and we are just due, that's all. One thing that did come up, and I needed to talk about this, one thing that did come up, one of the members of the Tourism Commission, Don Tarrant, owns Atlantic Lines, and had a concern, and I think this has been expressed by when the dunes went up, we heard complaints. And this was one of the first complaints I heard that I actually think kind of needs to be addressed. I didn't realize this, but that the Ocean Avenue businesses down there, they kind of count on September through the first half of October, if the weather's nice enough, to keep their business going. They count on some of that revenue. When something happens like what happened in September, where there was an early storm, and there's no question, everybody agrees, better safe than sorry. But as soon as the dunes go up, that basically is the end of their season. There's no getting that back. So they lost basically 4 or 5 weeks of revenue that they feel they could have made if the beach was more accessible. And I think it would be a good idea for us, because it happened 2 years ago too, same thing. Early storm, we made the necessary precautions, everything turned out fine, but that was the end of the season. I think it would be a good idea to start looking at, if this is going to happen again, what can we do after to try to save some of the season, to make the beach a little more accessible? And I have no idea what that would be. I mean, I don't think it's knock all the dunes back down and then waiting to do them again in October. I don't see that. But there's got to be something we can do so that the beach would still be accessible to people. And I don't really know. I don't have any real thoughts on it. I just wanted to make sure that it was brought up. I told them I would bring it to mayor and council and to the DPW. And let's see if we can think of something. God forbid, hope it never happens again, right? let's never have any other kind of threatening weather in September and October, but it would be good to have a plan. If it's gonna be early, how are we gonna save the rest of the season for those businesses down there?
I think, Tom, the dunes are almost, I mean, the science is really divided on whether they're
I agree.
effective or not. I mean, I've seen some studies that show it increases the chances of beach erosion significantly by having a steeper slope for
Yeah, I've
those
seen that
dunes.
too.
So I think we should probably really consider, obviously it's too late this year, but I think next year we really need to consider whether these dunes are effective or not, or if they're just a feel-good measure that really doesn't do anything
Yeah.
for us.
You know what, part of it also is the planting project we're doing down there. I mean, it's very, very, very in its early stages, and it's gonna be a long time before we're actually able to really put in enough plants along the boardwalk and around the playgrounds and around the gates where we're gonna have dunes built up that would withstand some kind of storm surge, that would protect the properties to the west of the boardwalk. I mean, if we had it right now, I think we would have a different discussion about whether we really need dunes or not, but we don't. So, and I've seen what you said, the idea that, there's definitely some science that says what you're doing is shortening the beach. There's some protection to be gotten from having a long beach, but usually that long beach is backed up by dunes. And that's where the real protection comes in. When you have a long, flat beach, and then there's dunes at the end to take that last surge of power from whatever waves. We don't have that right now. So I'm just thinking in terms of, say it happens again next year, is there anything we can do to make the beach more accessible after we've taken those precautions so that the businesses can still have some kind of season so they can make a little more money? So, okay.
Would they want us not to put up the dunes?
No, that was definitely not what they said. Everybody agreed, better safe than sorry. I said, well, you think no dunes? They were like, well, no, that's not what we mean, but that's what everybody, no way are we gonna like play fast and loose when there's a storm coming and it looks like I wouldn't want to do that. I mean, safe, better safe than sorry.
I don't know if that's actually the case, though. I mean, there's evidence to support that the dunes being constructed that hastily, you don't have compacted sand, they're weak, so
Yeah.
it's, again, a large storm comes along, the
Well,
dunes not
maybe that
really
is
doing
it.
much more than buying you an hour or so like that.
Okay.
So I think it's something we really need to take a look at scientifically
Mm-hmm.
and discuss with the actual professionals. I mean, I've had some talks with members from Stevens Institute, Rutgers University, and Monmouth University who've all written papers on this.
Right.
And I've gotten some different answers from each, but I think
Yeah.
we could definitely take a closer look and see if it's even
Sure.
worthwhile doing.
There was an article in the paper, the Asbury Park Press, I believe it was today, but down in Seabright where some of the beach clubs have done pushed up berms. And their one club, the berm was higher than the beach club building. So the DEP is definitely looking at that because you're not allowed to do that. I mean, we don't do that. We don't do anything like that. Our berms are about the size of the boardwalk, about the height of where the boardwalk is. I think it's whatever we do, the businesses were concerned that our safety precautions, once they're not needed, leaving them in place is killing the business at the end of the season, and they could use the money.
Okay.
Okay?
To me, I want to say a big thank you for the DPW for sprucing up Silver Lake in time for the rededication of the Frigario Park. We were lucky enough to borrow a machine from Wall Township, and we were able to cut down the Phragmites. It's a grass that it grows like bamboo. You can't kill it. You can just each year cut it down and just like we did, but you need the machine that Wall Township loaned to us. We took advantage of also doing Lake Como and the Cleary Park.
Correct.
That's great because I drove by and the parks look great. Especially happy with Silver Lake with the rededication coming up. The rededication is for a commissioner from Belmar, John Frigario. He was a commissioner in Belmar for 25, 26 years, And Silver Lake was dedicated to him years ago, but during Sandy, the monument and his plaque was destroyed. I believe it was Richie Nerl from the DPW came and found the plaque that was found after the storm. He put it in the yard, found it. We got a jetty rock from the beach. You're not going to move this jetty rock. And they drilled holes in it. So we're going to have a nice dedication for John Frigario. He certainly deserves it. We got a little program for him. This is Mr. Frigario, who's one of the big three, the McCleary, Taylor, Frigario commissioners, mayor and commissioners that ran Belmar for so many years. Mr. Frigario, his two sons will be there. Jim and Peter, and other family members and friends will also be there. So it'll be a real nice dedication. John Frigario was the brother of Alfred Frigario, who was one of the sailors that perished on the Juno. So this is a real family legacy in Belmar. So really, if you're interested in seeing family members from this great man, you should come down on Saturday, October 13th at 11 a.m. at the top of Silver Lake at 8th Avenue and North Lake Drive. Again, Mike, I can't thank you enough for you guys coming and doing all the work you did for that. There is a 5K run also on Saturday, October 13th. It's going to be through Lake Como, but it's going to be dedicated to the education fund for the three boys of Deirdre Seek, who was the daughter of Sharon Day, longtime employee, and Deirdre's father, Steve Day, who was a lifelong resident of Belmar. So Deirdre died within about a month after her mom Sharon passed away with the three boys. So all the proceeds from this 5K run will be going to the education fund for these three boys. If you don't plan on running, but you would like to make a donation, you can make a donation to the FSOS, Friendly Sons of Shillelagh, Foundation 5K. And you can address it to Post Office Box 627. Okay, that's Post Office Box 627. And certainly that family just that's a terrible tragedy, losing the grandmother and then the mother so shortly after that. Want to notice that the lifeguards are done. There's no more skeleton crew, no more lifeguards driving up and down on the beachfront. And the bathrooms on the boardwalk will close Sunday, October 14th. Just to let you know. Also, the Historical Society has a new display out in the front foyer. It's about the two schools in town. You know, Belmar Elementary, you see some history there, and from St. Rose. And the Historical Society, about once a month, changes their display. So it's a lot of work. It's well done. So when you leave tonight, just take a look over there, and it's very interesting. That's my report. Perfect. Okay, moving along to the consent agenda. Is there anything that one of you would like to say?
The public session first on the consent agenda.
Can someone explain why I always forget the public session? Okay. Public session on the resolutions, only on the agenda. We will continue to have a public session at the end of this meeting. So if you have any questions about the consent agenda, please step forward. Seeing none, I make a motion to close the public session for the consent agenda. I have a second from Tom.
All in favor?
Aye. Now to the consent agenda. Now I'd like to make a motion to adopt the consent agenda. Do I have a second?
Brian, I'd like to actually pull the Railroad Ave improvement project from the consent agenda. Have a separate discussion on it.
Sure.
Okay. You need a motion then?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye. So let's, Greg, what should we do first? That one resolution or the,
Consent agenda first.
okay. So repeating myself, I make a motion to adopt the consent agenda. Do I have a second?
Second.
Councilman Brennan?
Aye.
Mayor McGovern?
Yes.
Councilman Walker?
Yes.
Councilman Leonard?
Yes.
Okay, now I make a motion to adopt the resolution of approval to submit a grant application and execute a grant contract with the New Jersey Department of Transportation for the Railroad Avenue Improvements Phase 1 project. Do I have a discussion?
Yeah, so Brian, the reason I wanted this pulled was I had some current concerns with the region that was being proposed in this grant. I feel that there's a portion of Railroad Ave which fronts Memorial Field that's more in need of repair than the portion between 14th and 13th Avenue. And that's why I make the recommendation that we adjust the grant to cover that street versus the portion that's in front of the self-storage building. I feel the portion in front of Memorial Field gets a lot more traffic, plus we have parking spaces there.
If I may clarify, this application for Railroad Avenue improvements is between 10th and 13th. I think, I don't mean to assume, but I think you may be referring to the CDBG money that we received to do 13 to 16. This was our application to extend it now from 13th down to 10th.
I thought that was the various streets improvements.
The various street improvements, which just passed on the consent agenda, was for 12th Avenue from Sea to Ocean and 16th Avenue curbs and sidewalks.
This county wants to repay 16.
So this railroad improvement project would actually extend what has already been funded and take it just where you're talking about, Memorial Field, back Jager, and then to 10th Avenue.
So it would cover Memorial Field?
Yes.
Okay, because the initial map I saw showed it not being
It
paved.
is, yeah,
Okay.
at the 13th.
All right, then I have no problem with it if that's the case.
Okay.
Thank you for the explanation.
Sure.
There's a motion.
There's a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Councilman Brennan?
Aye.
Mayor McGovern?
Yes.
Councilman Walker?
Yes.
Councilman Leonard?
Yes.
Okay, now ordinances for the second reading and public hearing. Do I read this first and then ask for the public to come up, or? Okay. Ordinance number 2018-14. Ordinance of the Borough of Belmar amending the revised general ordinance, chapter 19, traffic, to designate the direction of Snyder Avenue under section 24 thereof. Now I open up for a public portion. Is there anybody out there in the audience that would like to come up and talk about the change of direction of Snyder Avenue? Seeing none, I would make a motion to close the public portion on ordinance 2018-14. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. So now I make a motion to adopt ordinance number 2018-14. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Councilman Brennan?
Aye.
Mayor McGovern?
Yes?
Councilman Walker?
Yes.
Councilman Leonard?
Yes.
Okay, next I guess we have the public portion. All right. If you have anything that you'd like to say to the council, please step forward to the microphone, state your name and your address, and we're good to go. Mr. Volker, even though we know your name, please step forward.
Tom Volker, 527 8th Avenue. Question on the bathrooms over the winter. Has any thought been given to maybe keeping the Taylor building bathrooms open over the winter?
Probably not, and the reason being is probably vandalism. We do have a little policy where we let the running club,
Jersey Shore Running Club.
Jersey Shore Running Club, open up so their runners can use the bathroom. Then they go out running and they come back at different times, but when they're gone, we recently have found their bathrooms a mess. I think it's a good thing that we allow them to open up so they can use the restroom, but no good deed goes unpunished.
Yeah.
And so while they're gone out for their run up to Asbury Park or down to Seagirt or something like that, people walking the boardwalk pull on that door, get in, and just recently, Mike, can you,
The last 2 Thursdays, it was vandalized.
last 2 Thursdays, and that's when their running club goes.
Correct.
So if we just left it open, and then I'm
Without the Parks Commission, would we be more eligible for grants and things like that? Would that make a difference?
I have seen on scoring sheets for something like Sustainable New Jersey, they do ask that question, and possibly you could pick up a point or two. So I have seen that asked in the past.
Okay, something to think about. I wondered about, when we take down the Shade Tree Commission, might that fall under the Parks Commission? Do we still have a Shade Tree Commission? Okay.
I'm crushed. Yes.
I don't want to burn you out, but
Someone in this room is the director of the Shade Tree Commission.
nicely done, nicely done.
Yes, I don't know, it's an advisory.
Something to think about.
Yeah.
Do we have a policy where if we take down a tree, we put up a tree?
In our ordinance, no, I don't believe we have it in our ordinance. Other towns do. All throughout the state, the different shade tree commissions, there's a lot of different ways they run their shade tree commission. We don't do it that way here in Belmar.
Would you consider that?
To me, it's a great idea, but here's the thinking. On your private property, we can't tell you what to do.
I understand.
On that strip between the sidewalk and the street, where most of the street trees are planted now, you know, some of them are dying, some of them need to be taken down, and unfortunately, it is the responsibility of the resident. And to take down some of these trees, it could cost you $1,000.
Yeah.
And usually the neighbors say, but I didn't plant it, why should I have to spend $1,000 to take it down? Good point. But getting back to that strip between the sidewalk and the street, trees don't want to grow there. It's not big enough. You know, and what the tree does as it matures and grows, it's going to spread its roots, and sometimes it starts lifting the sidewalk. Or growing into the street. So really the trees, when people call me up and I say, well, do you have room on your property? The tree would prefer to be on your property where it have more room. Some people, I don't want it on my property, I want it out in the street. And that's not a good place to plant a sycamore tree or an oak tree or anything like that. And then sometimes people, when they lift their sidewalks, the tree, they shave the roots or they cut the roots. And so they can level the sidewalk. You're weakening the tree. Now comes a storm, and you don't know what that tree's going to do because you've compromised the strength of it. So it's if you had a stretch that was like 6 to 8 feet wide, you could find some good trees. But some of them are like in Belmar, like 3, 4, only 5 feet wide. Trees don't want to grow there.
Yeah. I'm missing the trees, so I was hoping there could be some program.
Well,
I understand.
You could plant a tree, and it's going to take 25 years for it to mature and grow. So, you know, if you plan on being here for 25 more years.
Yes.
I'm working on it.
Okay.
Yeah, I was thinking that about 25 years ago, when we moved in, there was a program where you could buy a tree at that point. You could pay the town for a tree, and they'd put a tree in at your curb. And it was, and they matured beautifully. I forget what kind they were.
When a lot of these sycamore trees were planted in Belmar, when you see them in Belmar, were planted before there were asphalt streets. There were dirt streets.
I believe it.
Weren't cinder sidewalks. So the people that planted it weren't wrong. They didn't know that asphalt was coming down the road, as in concrete. And some trees adapt, a lot don't. And a lot of our trees really are rebelling, 4 or 5 years after Sandy. That week they spent in salt water is compromising a lot of our trees.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing none, I make a motion to close our meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you.
Drew left, yeah, it'll come on.
Mike.